Okay, so in this video, we are going through the concepts that we just learned on the video that we watched about space and the different techniques to create three-dimensional space on your 2D flat surface. So the first one is placement. Objects in the distance are closer to the horizon line. So the first thing that we need is the horizon line. So I'm going to draw a horizon line, giving myself plenty of ground space so that I can really show that difference. So first of all, we're gonna just draw rocks basically. So I've got a wobbly shape here that's close to the bottom of the picture plane. And then I'm going to make another one, and notice that I'm not really changing the size because that isn't the technique that we're working on here. But this one is further away from the bottom of the picture plane. And then a third one that is closest to the horizon line. Okay, so that is one of the concepts that we learned about that helps us to show that things are moving into the distance, that there is depth or space there. The next one is overlap. Shapes in front cover or overlap shapes behind them. So for overlap, I'm going to make my horizon line again. I'm going to do the same thing I did here, but I'm going to move them closer together now so that I have to create overlap. Again, I have not really changed the size because that's a different technique. We're going to put them all together as we get close to the end, okay? But here you can see how I'm using overlap. Now, shading is a little bit different, and we're going to kind of do that one on its own using just one spherish shape and deciding on a light source. So I'm going to determine that my light is coming from this direction, which means since my sphere is going to be sticking out the most right here, that means that I need to shade a little bit here on the other side because this side would be blocked a bit from catching that light. Okay, so I've shaded it just a little bit. I can use some cross-hatching lines here, just some little lines to give it a lighter value. And then I also want to think about the shadow. So if my light source is coming here, shining on my sphere, then the shadow of the sphere is going in the same direction as the light source because this is blocking out light to this space. And I'm going to start by just coloring that in lightly. I'm going to make my shadow a little bit bigger than it was. Okay, so I color that in lightly, but I'm wondering if you guys recall when we made our cupcakes in third grade, and I taught you that one little trick to making a shadow look more realistic is that it's going to be darkest where it's closest to the object that made it. So right here along the edge of the sphere, I'm just going to darken that up in the shadow space. Okay, and that will help to make it look a little bit more realistic. All right, and you don't have to get too perfect with this. This is just to kind of give you an idea of how shading affects that, making it look like it's two-dimensional, or making it look like it's three-dimensional. Okay, the next box is size. Objects in the distance appear smaller than objects that are close to the viewer. So now we're going to start taking some of these techniques and combining them with size. So again, we're going to make that horizon line. That's our line that separates the ground and the sky. We're going to draw our spherical rock-like shapes. And we are going to combine having the largest one up front with the placement, where I'm gonna just have also a little bit of overlap. Okay, so this one I can tell is in front because it's removing some of this one, it's covering it. And then I'll make one back a little bit smaller. And I could just keep going back smaller and smaller. All right, and so that starts to make it look like there's a little more space. I'm gonna just remove the overlap so I can kind of spread them out a little bit more. All right, so now they're starting to look like they're going way back in the distance there. So I have combined the placement, moving them closer to the horizon line, with some overlap and the size changing as it gets closer to the horizon line. All right, now let's move to value and focus. Things in the distance look lighter in color and are not as clear as things that are close. So I'm going to make my horizon line again. While I'm at it, I'm gonna go ahead and make this horizon line too. Okay, now I'm going to combine some of these elements again. I probably won't do as much overlap, but I may have a little bit of overlap, but I'm not gonna worry too much about that. So here's a few of my rock-like shapes. They're moving into the distance. Okay, this time there's not as much space, there's not as much distance as there is here. And I can tell that because these are so small back here. So that tells me that there's not quite as much space. All right, and now I'm just going to shade this one in darker. Okay, now with linear perspective, creating the illusion of distance using a vanishing point on the horizon line. So I'm going to create a point, and I can make it anywhere I want it to be on the horizon line. So I'm going to create that point there. And I'm going to make some lines, some perspective lines that are coming up close to the edge of the page. And this is going to make it look like I have maybe like a road or something here. Okay, and it looks like it's kind of coming towards me. I could make it look even more that way if I added some street lines. Okay, so notice that they are also pointing to the vanishing point. Notice that they are all lined up together. I used my ruler, so I know they're all lined up, and they are getting shorter as they go off into the distance. And this space between them should also be getting shorter. Okay, and then let's just use our little rocks over here again to illustrate this point. So I'm going to make another perspective line. And this is going to be the determining line for the size of my rocks. Okay, so maybe they could be bushes. So what I'm doing is starting with the largest one up close, and notice that it is within those guidelines. So it's filling in that space and getting smaller based on those lines as it goes back to the vanishing point. Okay, so we could imagine these are some kind of bushy trees or some like cypress trees or some kind of large bush here. And then we can kind of add in some detail. I'm just making some texture because you would see that up close. You might see the texture of it. And then as I go into the distance, it's going to get lighter and a little bit less detailed. I'm adding a little stump here for the tree at the bottom. Okay, and then I want to go back and erase this guideline. I'm going to keep that one because that became my road. Okay. And I would kind of keep working a little bit here on the shading. But you get the idea. So this is showing you all of these little techniques that we can put together to create the illusion of space, which is an illusion because we're working on a 2D surface, so there isn't any depth, but we want to make it look like there is. Okay, so these are the techniques that we're going to be working on for our next project.